A top 15 class is still in play for Washington.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new podcast on every single platform. And if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Now, Lars, we got a lot of big stuff to talk about here on this Friday. We wanted to spend some time talking about the 2025 team and how 3 Huskies have made their way onto Phil Steele's preseason All Big Ten team. So we'll dive into that a little bit later, because we're going to talk some trench recruiting and a little bit of Tristian Givens, that 5-star edge rusher from the state of Georgia, who Washington is doing very well with right now. But we wanted to start on this note because this does include Tristian Givens, but we're going to get to that in a little bit, because after getting a big-time commitment from Mason James on Thursday, the 4-star wide receiver from Oklahoma, it feels like a top 15 class is still very much in play for Washington, even after some recent losses.
So that was the discussion I remember we were having. I'm not sure if there's a specific discussion, but it was like, who else? Like, okay, if you don't, then who? And I think that was why we've never really been concerned truly about a top 15 class. But again, it's worth always reminding people on the front end of this, the rankings are subjective. Like, there is talent, but when a kid jumps 80 spots or falls 60 spots and nothing happened on the field, take that for what it is. But in the most part, when you look at what Washington, the caliber of player that Washington's been targeting in this class, you just look at the guys they brought in for official visits. Jerron Jones, a guy that, trending up for Washington. That's another where no matter who the cherry on top is in this class, TI Umu-Cais is a meat and bones, meat and potatoes part of this class. Whoever you end up getting is that third offensive lineman, fourth offensive lineman. So you think about all the guys they're in play for, like, it's absolutely a top 15 quality class. Just it's almost needs to always have an asterisk of, like, which site.
So, and no, that's a good point. When some sites, a quarterback, let's just, hypothetical here, a quarterback decommits from a program, then all of a sudden, because one school offers, then that quarterback gets a 4th star. Weird how that stuff seems to work out. So yeah, crazy, right? So, but that's not something that happens with Washington, and that's okay. Where, that certainly factors into it at the end of the day, which is your point. But I look at this class, and there are so many top tier options that are out there for Washington that they are doing very well with. Like TI Umu-Cais and Jerron Jones, 2 of the names that you bring up, are very, very important, where you need to secure those guys in order to get a top 15 class. You need to go add another 4-star wide receiver. You need to go add another big time offensive lineman. I really do believe that Pulalaiti Primus would fit that mold as well. We'll talk about him later on as well. But I look at where Washington sits with so many of these guys, and I think that you're in a really, really nice spot. And obviously, there's still a long way to go, and you still need to make sure you close and then hold on to some of these guys. Maybe there is a flip or 2 down the line, but I just think that this is something where it's very much in play. Like we talked about it today on June 12th, and Washington is sitting at 14th in the 247 Sports composite rankings. And that's a really nice spot to be in, but there's still such a long way to go. And I think that it's very possible. I want to see 1 or 2 more things go right before I would just come out and say, yes, this is going to be a top 15 class. But I really love where Washington sits with so many of these recruits, because we've had a lot of everydayers that are saying, oh, I want to see them close on more on the top end guys. Where is that? And I fully believe that's coming.
I agree. And also, there may be top end guys that are rated as high 3 stars. I always get a kick out of, again, I'm not going to name names here, but just when you see recruiting insider or anybody post like, hey, we're high 3-star, high, it's like, okay, why is he not a 4-star then? Like, what is the caveat here? And so it's about, and the interesting thing about, because again, I understand the whole top 15 class, but I wanted to kind of get your take on this. The number that really matters is the coaching and quality of class, quality of signing class, a top 12 class, because that's a CFP class. Until you get to 16, until we get to that date, is it a top 12 class? And I think that is actually absolutely still in play. And I think, is it a guarantee? No, but as long as you're in that discussion, and also, when you think about how UW is going about building this class, it's all about relationships. It is. I mean, again, you talk about, you can say flair and you can say opportunity and playing time and all the, businesses and all that sort of stuff. This really does seem like they truly that 22 class at Arizona the Jet had, that was a relationship class, and look what it did. This is that relationship class where you're talking about, years and years of these relationships coming to fruition. That's what it is. And I think that's why this is such an important class. And when you're talking about who ends up committing to Washington, well, whoever does, I have a hard time seeing it not be a top 15 class because of just the quality of overall talent.
So you mentioned top 12 there for a second. I think if Corey Wilder and Sam Utu are in the boat, then you're in that kind of discussion. So top 15 is certainly the expectation, as it should be for, Washington fans, when you think about, everything you just said and what Washington can provide on a yearly basis, especially with this coaching staff. But as you just kind of look around and the standing with some of these other guys, like if Brian Bonner's in this class, that's another name where it's okay. Yeah. Then you're in that discussion. And at the end of the day, just saying like, oh yeah, this ranking, like obviously that's not the only thing that matters, but I just think that that's something that has just become the expectation with, just the talent level of the guys that Washington is recruiting. Like, to just bring up a couple of names where we saw the rise of Gavin Day very quickly after the Washington offer. I feel like that's something where, it's really nice to get in on those guys early. Like Dominic Harris is somebody that you and I both believe, the 3-star offensive lineman from Ed W. Clark High School in Nevada. That's somebody you and I both believe deserves a 4th star because of just not only the level of hype he's gained, but who is recruiting him and what that says about his talent level when Texas, Georgia, and LSU all get in the mix a week after he commits to Washington. Like that is very significant. And I think that's something that, when people just kind of look at this and say, oh, well, this guy's a 3-star or this guy's this or this guy's that, those are all things that are very, very important. And Washington has taken several guys, in my opinion, that, just to continue this top 15 theme here, that over the course of their senior seasons could end up rising and just higher in the rankings, whether it's getting an extra star or just continuing to improve in those national ranks, which at the end of the day is just, it really is nothing more than optics, but it's still very positive for Washington to be viewed in that light.
Well, it's substantive in the fact that the name that came to mind was Elijah Durr, Mount Tahoma product, cornerback, a guy where, hey, if he has an incredible senior season, maybe he gets a high 3-star and then all those little things end up bumping you up. But you basically were alluding to it where you have the coaching, you believe in the coaching, and that's where Jed set the tone last year, where he even said, I'm not sure if it was last fall or last spring, probably spring, when he said, we want this class to be the highest ranked class, ever in the history of Washington, and then we want next year to be the highest. And it's like, well, and I remember him kind of, I don't know if it was during a press conference or maybe it was like just afterwards clarifying comment where it's like, why would I not set that bar where it's like, look, what am I going to say? Hey, we want to be, up there in the recruiting rankings. We want to make it look like we're trying, but not actually trying.
Well, so it goes back to an interesting point where he went on Softy's radio show the other day. And one of the things he said was like, along the lines of like fans need to get a little bit uncomfortable and you need to continue to push forward and strive for more in this world of college football. And it's something like you and I have talked about on the show in terms of something that we think he communicates very, very well and is very good at doing because that is an important thing in this world of college football. And this is one of those things where if you are able to consistently go out there and compete for the top talent, that is something that will continue to elevate your program year in and year out. And I feel like some fans who might not pay close attention to recruiting, which is okay, like that's not a bad thing. But for some of those fans who might say, oh, like why is this all of a sudden such a big concern? Like there are obviously reasons behind it where, like this is where the talent is coming from. This is the next wave of UW football. You want to build your class from the ground up. You want to build your program through the high school ranks because it's so much more sustainable that way. And to see Jed Fish continue to, raise the bar and push for these high-end prospects is such a positive thing just in terms of everything that's going on around the program because like you see it at every single position, but it really does matter more in the trenches. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. So, Lars, I've seen a lot of people be a little concerned about where Washington stands in the trenches. So before we dive into Tristian Givens, Colin Campbell, who committed to Michigan State, or any of these other prospects, is like, how do you feel about the state of the trench recruiting right now?
Fine. I mean, in the sense of, I'm not overly concerned, but I'm not overly wow, you have all these guys. But the fact is, here's why I'm saying it's fine. It's because you're still in contention. Yes, I mean, you know where I stand on Carter Wilder. Yeah, he committed to Ohio State, but that always is a guy where wait till December. We'll see what happens. Again, September 27th looming large. I've said that many times on this podcast. Another guy, Landon Barnes, you got him up for official. That you're still in the works there. So whatever ends up,
the Georgia visit there is really interesting. Sorry, I just want to make sure we threw that in there.
And I think that was because, again, we hadn't heard a ton coming out of his visit, but then you cancel the. So, again, it's like, okay, where do you stand? And I think that's why overall I'm fine as we record this here on June 12th. But, that's a big if TI Umu-Cais is in that, then I'm not concerned at all. If so-and-so is there.
David Schwerzel being another one.
Exactly. And when you're in the discussion for them, I can say, fine, I'm not going to go either way. But once you get in the boat, or if you commit elsewhere, I'm not overly concerned about guys committing elsewhere, the Wilder to Ohio State, Campbell to Michigan State, because of who they already have in the class, especially with respect to Campbell. But sure. Then who you still have on the board, and potentially kind of could work in there on defense.
So. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that, because losing Kari Wilder is significant. Like, that's very obvious. But it's one of those things where, I mentioned optics at the end of the first segment, but that's one of those things where, let's say David Schwerzel, TI Umu-Cais, and Tristian Givens all end up in this class. I don't think anybody is worried about the optics of that anymore. And you're not worried about the talent either, because that's a 5-star in Tristian Givens and a whole bunch of 4-stars in Schwerzel. Derek Coleman Brusa is already in the boat, and TI Umu-Cais. So you're already happy about that. And then you can add in a Fasiale and still be, intrigued by that. If you want to add a Landon Barnes or a Semu Mawala, who was on his official visit, the 4-star edge rusher from Texas A&M. Like, there are so many other ways that you can find a way to make this class work. And it's, it's a similar point on the offensive line as well, where you're in the mix for so many just really talented prospects that it's going to shape up in a really solid way no matter what. Where, losing Sam Utu, optics of that, not great. But Pualaiti Primus is somebody who has interest from all over the country. Like, seriously, I think he's a really, really overlooked prospect from Midland, Texas, I believe is where he goes to high school. And that's somebody where, the optics of that are going to be, you're pulling like this mid-tier 3-star guy. And then you go watch the film and you just see what kind of player he is and how he fits in Jed Fish's scheme. And it's, no, I'd be more than happy with where that take is. And it's, it takes going in and watching the film and seeing just kind of the size and the offer list and the way he moves. And all of a sudden, I feel like, their fans are right to be concerned with where it is right now when, the number one prospect on your board does end up going elsewhere. But you are just so heavily in the mix with so many other guys, Tristian Givens included. Like, Washington is doing a phenomenal job with his recruitment right now. I cannot overstate that. And I just think that at the end of the day, like, let's not even just say the end of the day, at the end of July, I think people are going to be very, very comfortable with where this 2026 class is.
Have you ever had a peach apple cobbler pie?
I actually love peach apple pie. It's one of my favorite things.
Again, that's what I'm saying. That's what we're talking about here. And I think the other thing to consider in this is, you're talking about Ryan Walters bringing in his scheme, which is slightly different in terms of the trenches than what Steve Belichick was using and operating, especially with that 0 down front against Wazoo. But with that being said, you look at it, right? That will never forget that. But you look at it and think, you trust Jason Kabusi's evaluation with what he was able to do with Uyunglele at Arizona. He knows how to find and develop guys. He can do it. So I'm not worried. And I think that's another reason why I'm not worried. And then you talk about maybe some of these guys like Kari Wilder, a handful of others, where once you see Ryan Walter's scheme at Washington with Jason Kabusi, how it works and everything, it's like, ooh, actually that does appeal to me. And if you're Kari Wilder, maybe, like I said, you make that unofficial visit to the Washington Ohio State game, and you're like, you know what, I'm an Ohio State commit, but not a bad defensive line looking here. So you just think about that, and that might also be kind of part of it, where guys are, certainly impressed with the coaching and background and all that, and believe in what Jed's, offering from that perspective. But it, like we talk about then, I just want to see it. Like I'm fully on board, but I just want to see it once to know it works.
Right. And that's kind of a big piece of this as well, where, because there were a lot of everydayers that shared your sentiment with, Kari Wilder being a potential flip and keeping him closer to home and all those sort of things. Also, depending on the situation with Larry Johnson, where I've heard there's, I feel like it's not just me, but there's a rumor going around that he might end up retiring in the next couple of years. That's Ohio State's very, very good defensive line coach. So that there are a lot of factors at play there. And, the reason I'm so staunchly against it is, if it's something where he commits to Washington, I feel like people will just be on the other side of that of, you got to hold off Ohio State. Now you got to hold off Notre Dame, whatever else. So there's always a lot there to consider, but it's something where Washington has done a good job of that. But I just I wanted to put that out of my mind, and I'm going to continue to operate this way because I think that's just the way that it should be, where you are still in the mix for so many talented guys that it's a lot of recruiting does end up coming down to being a patience thing, more or less, where you're going to look at it and it's, today it sounds like they're doing really well with somebody. Now he's on his official visit somewhere else. And now all of a sudden, no, I don't know how I feel about this anymore because I haven't heard anything. But that's something where this staff has done such a good job building these relationships, and especially in the trenches, where I look at this 2025 offensive line class that you pulled in, and it's you look at it, it's in a really good spot. Some of these guys are going to play really early. And I think that has an impact on several guys. When I think about a Sam Utu or a Colin Campbell, and it's like, it's going to be really hard to get on the field when Champ Talialia is playing in 9-10 games as a true freshman, and John Mills is as well. And all of a sudden, you're still stacking a class, and you're still adding a 5-star offensive tackle in Cody Green, somebody with interest from every school in the country, and Dominic Harris, and a really powerful 3-star guard who certainly is poised to rise up the rankings this year, playing over at Puyallup, and Adeong Yang. There's so much just potential right now on the offensive line, especially for this class to continue to grow, that I don't think these recent losses are anything to really be concerned about.
Because of Michael Switzer. If there's anybody that has a better ROI in terms of buy stock now early, and then you will reap the rewards when you get it down, 6, 8, 12 months down the line, it's Michael Switzer. That's what we've seen. And we both said it when he was promoted. But again, it's, what the fans would say, why are we promoting an analyst? Why not go get, everyone wanted Scott Huff. We both love Scott Huff. No slight to Scott Huff. But if you've seen the same tree in the forest 4 or 5 times, you're probably lost. And I'm not saying that we'd be lost in that case, but that's why Jed is so, again, confident in himself. He knows what he's doing, and going and getting Switzer and promoting him, empowering him, clearly knows how to develop and, has an eye for talent. Look at the Don Harris example, where it's like he was way early on him, not just days early. Absolutely. We're talking months early on him.
And Brendan Carroll does deserve credit for that one as well. But it's something where, you talk about him as a recruiter. It's something where some of the guys on campus have said as much, where, you talk to John Mills, Champ Talialia, some of these guys, and it's, like when I got on campus and I got a chance to meet Michael Switzer, that was a guy that really helped my recruitment and somebody I really wanted to play for. And, we give credit to Caleb Wilson, who has helped a lot at wide receiver. There are so many positions where guys that, aren't necessarily the position coach right now. Aaron Van Horn is another really good example of that, where there are guys who, once these prospects get on campus and meet these other recruiters that Washington has on staff that can't go off campus, Marcus Griffin being another one. There are so many recruiters on the staff that Jed Fish has done a really good job bringing in. And then once, you're able to really develop a relationship with these guys, get them on campus and meet them, Washington is doing a really good job of closing, but sometimes you just need to let the process play out. And I think in the trenches especially, we're going to see the fruits of this labor of the last 6-7 months really pay off by, again, I just want to say the end of July. And Lars, by the end of July, you and I are going to be back on campus watching a trio of all Big Ten preseason honorees. So Phil Steele comes out with his preseason all Big Ten teams, and we see Jonah Coleman and Buda Tariq Alukta on the second team, and Denzel Boston as a first-team wide receiver. And it's really nice to see, Washington just coming in with a little more hype than we saw at any point last year. I still believe this team is going to be a little underrated, but starting to see, Washington pick up a little bit of steam. And that's kind of why we wanted to talk about these guys and just what this means for this team as a whole, because, the shout out to our friends at FanDuel, the over-under is still set at 7.5 for wins this season. And it feels like not only is it in really easy pick right now to say, yeah, Washington's going over 7.5 wins, but it's also just easy to look at these guys and then look at Damon Williams at quarterback and say, there is so much talent on this team, because Takario Davis is not one of these names. Like you look at all that talent and you say that, yeah, Washington is going to be a riser this year.
Yeah. Right. When you said that, I was trying to figure that out. Like, how? Like, I guess,
right.
Get it. Maybe because he's not in the Big Ten. He hasn't played in the Big Ten, but like, he was like still one of the best in the Pac-12 in 2023. Obviously, had to fall off in 24. Fall off being, going from 16 PBUs to 6, and playing in a different scheme a little bit slightly and things like that. But now reunited with John Richardson. By the way, that's why you have so much optimism, is because we know how good these coaches are. We've seen it when like as I wrote on Huskies Wire, John Richardson, everywhere he's been, he's developed guys. And now at Washington, it's just, you're just cashing in your chips. And so similar with the FanDuel bet, it's like, yeah, just cash in your chips. That's easy money. That's easy money, free money. They're giving you money right now. Like literally take the money. But with that being said, it was ironic because 14, 15, 16 in 2015 with Chris Peterson, it has that same type of energy, but Jed's kicking it up a notch with, the demand. Like Jake was great in 2015 in terms of like that. You could see what was on the horizon potentially. Damon is that next he puts the D in dynamic. It's like Jake was great. Damon could really be like special. And I think that's why, when we're talking about, I can see why they're getting not overlooked, but maybe like, undervalued right now because Damon hasn't played a full season. And
sure,
not that truly matters, but it does. Like it's a factor. Can Jed, change some play calling woes, at certain times in certain areas of the field? Probably. Again, he's a smart guy. He's got enough people in the building. He listens. So you think about all the improvements. Like you hired Jed for a reason. This is why you went out and got the talent, knew what, like, I remember after the Penn State games, like, look, could we just get to December? Because we know what we need to address in the portal. Could we just get to that point? Like, this is a formality at this point. But everything that, and that's why I was, so optimistic of Jed when he came here, is because like Washington and Jed is truly a perfect fit. And, Denzel Boston being in Jed Fish's offense and leading the team in touchdown receptions while still not having 1,000 yards. So he could, even get better this year. He will get better this season, obviously, because the numbers are going to go up. But you just look at things. If last year was the foundation, that key buzzword, this might be a formidable year.
So I've a couple of things I want to mention. The first thing, just because you said his name most recently, Denzel Boston. You talk about him not getting to 1,000 yards. I have a pop quiz for you. Do you remember where his last touchdown catch came last season?
UCLA?
No, Iowa. No. He had 9 touchdowns by week 7 against Iowa, and then didn't have one for the back half of the season. And one of our bold predictions last year was that he was going to lead the Big Ten in touchdowns, and he was well on pace to do that. And obviously Jeremiah Smith was incredible, but he was on his way to doing that. And then of course, some of the injuries happen, the offensive line stuff happens as well, and it just continued to just kind of regress as Washington saw better and better competition. But he has that potential to continue to improve, like you said, which is a really great point. But it's also bringing back a guy like Jonah Coleman for a senior season. And I think Jonah is kind of, you call him the heartbeat of the offense all the time, as the Everydayers know, but it's something where I look at what his role is going to be this season. And I think it might end up being a little bit smaller than it was last year. And I think that is going to be a good thing, because one of the reasons is you're going to mix in Adam Muhammad more. You're going to mix in Jordan Washington more. You're going to mix in Damon Williams more. And that's not because, Jonah is anything less than a top 5 running back in the country in my opinion. It's because you want to keep him fresh. You want to keep him efficient because he was able to run for, what was it, like 5.8 yards per carry during his sophomore season at Arizona. He is an extremely efficient runner, and we have so many different options that can help him out in the backfield. I think that's something that is really, really important for just what this offense is going to do this season, because, last year it was pretty easy to just kind of take the read option out of the playbook when Will Rogers was on the field because you knew where the ball was going. There are so many different things that are going to change when you talk about the change in play calling this season that are going to just help what this offense is going to be down the line. The improved offensive line is going to be a big part of this. But I look at this offense and I can't help but be very, very optimistic because the offensive line is going to take a step forward. There's no route where it is what it was last season. It is going to be better. And then you combine that with this improved group of skill guys, plus two, just to keep the theme of the segment here, two all Big Ten guys in that group. There's so much room for improvement here that it's just really, really exciting to think about what it could be like this fall.
And the guys that didn't make the list, aside from Takario, which is its own thing, CJ Christian, a guy who could be an all Big Ten guy at the end of the season.
Sure.
There's a number of guys you can go down that list with. And to me, it's a case of and you know what? It's just fuel for the fire. Buddha being another example there, because what if Jake Amani plays? Extra Alexander looked really good in the spring. You only got so many linebacker spots. And I think, again, another great coach in Brian Odom, he knows how to develop linebackers. So you bring in the talent, you have the talent, and you can develop it. So to me, it's a case of if there's 3 at the start of the season, over under 6.5 at the end of the season.
I might take a slight under right now, but there are 4 teams. I'm probably gonna be wrong there, but I'll take that right now because one of my big thoughts here is this defensive line. There are so many nice contributors up front, and I think that's another big reason why we think this team is going to take a step forward. I don't know if you have one guy. I think Antario Thompson is the leading candidate too, and then of course Zach Durfee as well. Health being the biggest question there, but with what Antario Thompson is able to bring to the table, I think that's a guy who you could end up seeing on one of these lists. I don't know if there's an all Big Ten first team name on that group right now, but you can have 2, 3, 4 names that are littered around the second, third, fourth team honorable mention sort of list. And I think that's just a really exciting thing because the talent level is just so much higher than what it was last year. And you look at the turnover on this roster, you're still adding 42 new players where you added 44 last year, but it just feels so different. Because not only did you get a lot of them to come in before spring practice, but you just look at what this group is and it's just bigger, faster, stronger, more talented in every single regard.
It's leveled up. And I think that was what the Big Ten showed, where Jed, year 1 of the Big Ten, I think it was at me. Where was it? Where basically he was alluding to the fact it was new coach, new conference, brand new team. Half the team dipped out of the national championship, understandably so, in terms of either graduating, going to the NFL, or earning the right to transfer. In the case of most of the offensive line, because they're 4th, 5th coach in 4 years. Okay, you guys, you stayed for a natty, you deserve to do whatever you want to do for your last year. But also Gearin coming back. Again, that's another kind of quiet addition there where people might not think about that, but that could be your 6th O-line MVP at the end of the day, where when you talk about the brutal nature of the Big Ten, having that depth along the trenches where we're going back to last segment, it's that's where it comes into play, where like you mentioned, you might not have 1 or 2, first round picks. That's how we say along the defensive line. But you got a lot of depth there that you did not have last season. And also, Simona Peppa, the number of guys with big, girthy bodies that can plug up and do a number of different things. It's having the options that you didn't have last season. That's where it's so different.
So I absolutely agree with you. I want to spend 60 seconds on Gearin before we get out of here, because I think that he's somebody who is a really, really important piece of all of this. And it's not that he's, you talk to him, he said as much. It's not that he's expecting to come in and start and play every snap along the offensive line and then go be a first round pick at the NFL level. It'd be great if that were the case, but it's something where you have really put yourself in a nice spot at that position where I feel like some people are going to be a little concerned about the offensive line, rightfully so, because you haven't seen it yet. And even in the spring game, they were kind of like some mix and match sort of groups that we're probably not going to see on the field together this fall. But I look at that group and it's, Gearin and Champ-Talialia and like Zach Henning. I feel like he'll end up playing a little bit more center this fall, but like that's the group at right guard. And then it's like Pocky Finau and John Mills at left guard right now. And yeah, there's a lot of inexperience and a lot of youth among those guys, but it's something where, to tie all this together, a lot of what you mentioned earlier, this coaching staff has done a really great job of developing guys, and they're not just throwing guys out there to play them. They're throwing guys out there because they believe they're ready. If they really believe that, like they were just throwing guys out there because they wanted to play people early, we would have seen Pocky Finau playing all 13 games last year. Like that's a really big part of this. And I think that just the way this offensive line is going and developing, there are so many positives that you can think about that I think we're going to see flashes of this year. I think we're still going to see struggles at different points in time, like when you run into what Ohio State could be, or some of these teams that do have a stronger defense. There's still going to be glimpses of growing pains, that it's all not totally together yet. But it's going to be such an improvement from what we saw last season that there's going to be so much room for optimism. And with guys like John Mills and Champ-Talialia going into their sophomore year in 26, it's just going to say, okay, all that experience they gained in 2025, just like DeMond did in 2024, it's going to do nothing but propel this group forward. And we're going to see this team take a step forward behind the Jonahs, the Denzel Bostons, the Tariq Aluktas, the Takario Davises of the world. But then next season, we're going to see it really level up once again, which is just an exciting thought for this coaching staff and everybody around the program. But Lars, that's all we got today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. And a quick programming note, we are going to be coming to you on Tuesday next week for the first time. Got a really fun crossover show planned for you. So just make sure you keep an eye out on that. And the best way to do that is make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you know when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.